So, dear friends and pilgrims, we are on our peak down. Let's say we were down yesterday, now we're on our way up again, and only two more sharings. So again, we light our little candle on this Dámh Imeall is what we'd say, which is the day before Friday Imeall. And so we'll bring in our lights together, igniting flame in our hearts, the flame in our candles here, sending that light from all our homes into your hearts, heart and hearts. And we'll start again with a little prayer. Today, of course, is the day dedicated to Nicholas. So we'll be calling on him there too now. So today, of course, is the heart chakra day, the day of the heart, even though we did a lot of heart work yesterday. And I hope that maybe you wrote some little letters to your heart. I certainly wrote one to mine, but it was so sad. I just couldn't share it with you because I was hitting one of those down times that we all do at these times, these very emotional times that we're going through. But today is the base that is the heart chakra, and that's of course the chakra of love, of joy, connection, compassion, inner peace, and other little phrases that I didn't share with you yesterday. Meister Eckhart: every heart is a sacred temple where neither time nor flesh nor space can touch. Our hearts are our sacred temples. His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, the good heart, for me, summarizes what is best in nature. The good heart. So again, we'll start with our blessing our lips. And again, I'll take it up a little semitone each time to heighten it so that God would want to hear us and would want to open our lips. And may our mouths declare her praise. Lord, open my lips, and my mouth shall declare your praise.
Lord, open my lips, and my mouth shall declare your praise.
Lord, open my lips, and my mouth will declare your praise.
Lord, open my lips, and my mouth will declare your praise.
Lord, open my lips, and my mouth will declare your praise.
Lord, open my lips, and my mouth shall declare your praise.
Our open reflection is from Rumi this morning. The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Don't go back to sleep. People are going back and forth across the doorsill where the two worlds touch. And I suppose that's the only doors across the moment. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. Our little psalm, again, we'll return to Psalm 120 and finish it off because we just did two verses of it the other day, but this is the beautiful the mountains, from where shall come my help? Or at this moment, because it's from nature, our help shall come. The Lord is your guard and your shade.
The Lord is your guard and your shade.
At your right hand God stands.
At your right hand God stands.
The sun shall not smite you,
By day the sun shall not smite you,
nor the moon in the night.
nor the moon in the night.
The Lord will guard you from evil.
The Lord will guard you from evil.
God will guard your soul.
God will guard your soul.
God will guard your going and your coming,
God will guard your going and your coming,
both now and forever. Amen.
both now and forever. Amen.
Now let us take a little moment of silence again to call in what wants to be spoken in our hearts today and now, and to bring in all who we want to remember at this time. Our loved ones, those who have passed over, our ancestors, our friends. In the silence of our own hearts, we'll make our prayer. Waking up this morning, I smile. 24 brand new hours before me. I vow to live fully in each moment and to look on all beings with eyes of compassion. That's a little prayer of Thich Nhat Hanh, Buddhist from Plum Village. How to look on all people with eyes of compassion. Oni, will you put up St. Nicholas there for us?
I certainly will.
Because today is Nicholas's Day. Nicholas is a word of Greek meaning victory of the people. He was a 4th century Armenian saint, apparently a very kind man, because there are lots of legends about him. For instance, one time this very poor man had 3 beautiful daughters, but he had no money to give them a dowry. And so that, of course, would probably have meant that they would have to resort to prostitution. So St. Nicholas said, leave that with me. So off he went. And the first day he got a little bag of money and he brought it back to the house, and the door was opened and he threw the bag of money in the house. Then the second day he went off, got another little bag of money, brought it back, threw that into again. And then the third day he came back and the door was closed. So what had he to do with his little bag of money? Only to climb up on the chimney and drop it down the chimney. So of course, that eventually became Santa Claus, Nicholas in America. But have a look there, because eyes of compassion there. You'll see his beautiful eyes there, which are almost crying their tears. You see lots of red, and this is an icon. It's a 19th century icon from Yaroslav school in Moscow, and 19th century. And it's housed here in Glenstall Abbey. So it's an icon that I see an awful lot of days, actually. But you can see that lovely hand gesture there that he has. That's the hand gesture of blessing. There are 2 mudras of blessing. That one you can see there, which is the one of teacher. So you have the 2 fingers up there, which I always think is sort of teacher and pupil. And then you have the perfect circle there, the circle of infinity he's holding. So any icons that you'll see of Christ will be like this. So that'll be the Trinity there. This is the mudra of the hand gesture of teaching. And then the perfect circle, then you'll see in Christ, the Christ icons. The text that St. Nicholas is holding here is actually our own Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, and so on. But I'm very, very fond of this. Have a little look on either side. Now, you probably on the right, you will see Mary. It might be on your left, I don't know which. No, but you'll see Mary, and she's holding a stole. Good. And she's holding a stole there of that she's going to present to Nicholas. And then on the other side is Christ there. And then come down a little, only if you can, and point St. Catherine on one side, a great Russian saint, and on the other side then is a guardian angel.
Oh yeah,
so
Mary is up here, right?
Good, yeah.
Then that's Jesus, is it?
Yes, it is, on the other side, yeah.
And then this is
either a little angel or St. Catherine with the crown.
Catherine, and then this is the angel over here.
Right. And but St. Nicholas, of course, patron saint of the thing, like Russia, mariners, young girls looking for a dowry, of course, from that story I told you. Children, because there's a lovely story that one time he found out that there was a butcher who had killed 3 small children and was keeping them in a vat of marinade. And he was going to sell them to people as pork during the famine. So St. Nicholas came along and he placed the sign of the cross over the barrel, and out the 3 children hopped. And so he's patron saint of children, patron saint of brewers, because of the barrel too. So he's very, very busy. St. Nicholas is all you could call him for anything. He's pawnbrokers, bakers, but extremely powerful saint. And in Russia, they have a little saying, sure, if God dies, we'll always have St. Nicholas. And marvelous. And of course, he's buried in Ireland.
Of course.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Crusaders, Moley went and they brought, it might be a toenail now, or it might be an eyebrow, but there certainly is some little relic
buried in
of in Gerford, in Kilkenny. And of course, so I just wanted us to pray to him. And so our final prayer today will be, Saint Nicholas, we ask you to touch our hearts with childlike belief and childlike trust and hope at this difficult time for us. We ask you to be our patron saint now and to walk with us in the path of compassion, of kindness, of love, and of togetherness. Amen.
Lovely, Nora.
Thanks for putting that up. No,
Great.
great.
We'll take a look at him later, and we recorded a little prayer to Saint Nicholas on one of our albums. Oh, there he is. Look at that.
I have one little other thing that I've got to show you. A friend of ours in the monastery, a great friend of ours actually, Brother Huron, he was a wood turner. So he gave me this little gift that was presented to him. And look, it's the dotiest little thing. It's in wood.
Hold it back.
And
Hold
if
it
you
back
look,
further from the camera.
can you see it at all?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's his back, you see, with his two little hands back there. And this is his face. So Saint Nicholas will look after us.
And so today we're going to proceed around the theme of story and storytelling and what that means. And the fabulous thing about the theme of storytelling is you can't go wrong because everything kind of falls into a story. And
well, in Ireland, Owen, we, as you know, we use the word story very much so every day, because when you meet somebody, you go, well, what's the story? A lot. Like everybody says, well,
that's
what's
a
the
great
story?
greeting. Yeah.
It is. And then a more accusative, confrontational use of story as well. What's your story? You know? Or then if you had just met somebody, you'd say, oh, what was his or what was her story?
Mm.
Yes, that can almost be like a fabrication or a lie.
Yeah, or what's his story, meaning like I didn't particularly like that person, but what's her story? But then what's your story can also be quite like, what's your story? We say that among friends as well. So it's something. And story then to me means two things: our public perception, our public image, the story that everybody knows, and then our inner story that is unfolding all the time. And each story is made up of things that we are given that we reject, really. I often think of stories not about things that we do, but things that we've chosen not to do, and as a result we are doing what we're doing. So that can be very mysterious, that life is a bit, or the path of life is a bit like that American arcade game Whack-A-Mole, that you're constantly whacking the things you don't want to do, and you end up doing the middle thing, which is the things that you least want to do. But of course we have to own our stories in all sorts of different ways. But that's the more mystical view of stories. And then there's the more pragmatic view of storytelling, of course, which is an art form in itself, Owen, which you've mastered really, Owen. I have a rambling sense of storytelling, I would suspect.
That's good. It's like the Celtic spiral, you see, which just keeps on meandering, but does have some kind of weird and wonderful pattern beneath it all. The word story, of course, is fascinating because it's from the word store, something that is harvested or kept or treasured within. And that is story, coming from something deep. And I see story too, as I was saying at the start of our hEdge school, that story is actually one of the first forms of information technology that was developed. Imagine being gathered around a campfire or something and being the first person to tell a story, or being part of the first group of people to listen to a story. And who were the first people to tell a story, and what did they do? And again, what were the circumstances that forced people into telling that story? What was happening in that world at that time that pushed people into this new form of communicating, this new way of gathering, this new way of transferring, of forming community? And in a sense, what we're doing here is we're being pushed into this new way of telling stories ourselves. And the story is also what's very important about the story. The difference between story and history is fascinating, because history is something that is very particular to our own culture and our own society, is the idea of history and the differentiation between history and story, or history and
her
mythology.
story. And her story too. History and her story.
History and her story. So what does that mean for us when we tell something that is a history and something that is a story? I'm a great student of history myself, and I did a master's in international relations, and I love grand narrative history. And what always hit me was the ancient adage that history is written by the victors. And there's no truer thing, I can tell you, in the history of the world than that history is written by the victors. And the idea of history being a abstract and exact science is, if someone starts talking about history in that sense, you know, to head for the door, because they're telling you a little lie, you know. What's your saying, Nora, about there's two sides of it? What is it? There's two sides of a story. And
No, three sides to every story, and that the one in the middle is the true story. Not just two sides, but three sides to every story. So you hear the two, but it's really the one in the middle.
I've heard an extension to the victors write history and the losers write the songs. Did you ever hear that one?
That's lovely. And the other thing is that anything that comes down as anonymous in history, you can be sure was written by a woman.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
And I think that's something that's really interesting about mythology, really, is that it is the story in the middle, that there's something that is true, which is far deeper than just an account or a recounting of something. And I find that so much of the great folk stories that are passed on in tradition have within them a deeper story, a third story that is between the true and the untrue. And it's something that's, we use the word metaphor. So what is something metaphorically speaking? So whenever you hear a story, you're the hero of the story, you're the villain of the story, you're the problem in the story, and you are the solution in the story as well too. So it's not just that one thing of the story is a metaphor for you and your life. They're all metaphors for you and your life, you see. So for me, that's the third version, and that's the story that's beneath the story. And that's for me where truth lies. And then you can talk about then taking that wisdom and activating it in the world. And that's when things start to get where you enter into dispute and debate about what's real and what's not real. So I'm going to give you a couple of stories now, and Noreen is going. Molly, you might give us a little story too, and then Noreen is we're going to build up to a grand finale of one of the greatest storytellers of the 20th century. Quite an undisputed, one of the greatest storytellers of the 20th century, and he happens to be Irish. Who knew? So I want to talk to you a little bit about the stories of the Irish Celtic saints. And the Celtic saints are fascinating people. In a way, all of Ireland, all of the little communities in Ireland had these saints that were the local gurus, the local spirits and sages and wise ones of that particular little genius loci, that particular spirit of a place. And each little parish and community in Ireland has wells dedicated to that saint, or hilltops dedicated to them. And people in that community used to gather at these places on what were called paten days or pattern days to celebrate these saints and the wisdom that these saints brought to us, the metaphorical healing and sometimes the actual physical healing that these saints were giving to us throughout the ages. So many of these local gurus have been lost, but many have survived over the centuries and centuries and centuries. So I'm going to tell you a quick story about one of them called Saint Brendan. Saint Brendan is known as Saint Brendan the Navigator. And Brendan was from Tralee, which is in the, I'll do my mother's map of Ireland. This is my mother's map of Ireland. And Saint Brendan was from down here in Tralee. And he, there's a beautiful mountain down there in Tralee called after him, Mount Brandon, fabulous mountain. And it's said Brendan was one of these extraordinary sort of Celtic saints that lived on the cusp of Christianity and Celtic druidry. And so in this druidic tradition, he was living out this new Christian story. So the Celts had this very fierce warrior-like type of spirituality. And Brendan and these early saints represented this in their own particular ways. One of the things that these early saints used to do was severe acts of penance. And so they would fast very severely for periods of up to 40 days and undergo feats of huge physical stress. And one of the things these Irish saints used to do was called the Peregrinatio Dei, or the pilgrimage to God. And it was a martyrdom where they would get into a boat and sail out and just float out into the western horizon, off the edge of the known world. And this was done as the greatest sacrifice, a great martyrdom to God. So there's many stories about Saint Brendan, but his most famous was Saint Brendan, the voyage, Brendan's voyage, the navigation of Saint Brendan. And this was one of the most popular stories in Europe at the time. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of accounts all across Europe of Saint Brendan's voyage. So these stories, and there was a bunch of these stories of Irish saints traveling out into the unknown. They were called imrams. And these stories were very popular at the time for a few centuries in Western Europe. So off Brendan went himself, and it was 14 monks, himself and 14 monks, and they got into a little raw hide, a hide currach, a boat made of animal skin, still traditionally used on some of the communities in the west of Ireland. And him and his monks, they sailed out west, out into the great unknown. And there is a great account for 7 years Brendan and his monks traveled, just being carried by the currents of the oceans of the North Atlantic for 7 years. And the idea of this journey was that Brendan wanted to find the Isle of the Blessed. The Isle of the Blessed, which was, again, a metaphor for the promised land, for the Holy Land. And he wanted, he had heard another person talk about this island and just felt totally, he was moved to tears and felt totally obsessed to go out and to find this place that he'd heard of. And it was also called St. Brendan's Isle. And it's marked in the medieval maps. St. Brendan's Isle is marked out in the Western Ocean. And it said that Columbus, when Columbus was going to sail out west, he visited Galway to consult the maps that the monks had there. And it said that Columbus, on the basis of those maps, went south to follow the currents to America, and then back up north to follow the currents back home. So, but anyway, that's more where story and mythology clash there. But one day, it was said when the monks were out at sea, Easter was approaching. And the monks couldn't find dry land to say their Easter ceremonies. And they were desperately looking around them to try to find where they would find some firm ground to get off the stormy seas that they had found themselves in, and to dedicate themselves to the ritual that was the highest point of their religious calendar of the year. And just at the last moment, an island appeared up out of the ocean. And the monks couldn't believe it. And they just gave such thanks, and off they scurried from the boat onto this island. And they gathered driftwood from around, and they made a fire and prepared for the great festival of Easter. And they made their celebration, and just as they were finishing, suddenly they noticed the island was beginning to sink. And so they gathered all their stuff and scurried back onto the boat just in time before the island sunk down into the ocean and disappeared. And just as it did, a big jet of water jetted up out of the island, and they realized that they had been on the back of a whale for the 3 days that they had been celebrating Easter. And every year for 7 years, this whale would return just at the right moment to sustain them for their most sacred time together.
And that's a great metaphor. That's a great metaphor for us only, as it's a great metaphor for us as we prepare. We're talking about getting together for Easter ourselves. So we're creating that whales back together, which will appear and suddenly disappear again back into nature. It's a very lovely image. Sorry, I couldn't. I was too excited not to interrupt you.
I know, yeah. Sometimes I know it's an extraordinary metaphor for us today to want to pray for this firm land that is all around us. There's just a sense of the earth shifting, of the rug being pulled from under our feet. And so this common desire, this yearning for solid ground, is something that Seamus Heaney, the great Irish poet Seamus Heaney, really focuses on when he does a poetic account of this story. So when we were growing up as kids, all kids in Ireland all learned this story in school. It's still taught, you know. It has survived in folklore. This story is still told. And I remember our father, our late father, lovely Imeall, he used to tell me this story, and he was very proud of it, actually. And I remember there's a lovely folk park near where we lived, where Noreen is there in Limerick, called Craigennone. And in Craigennone, they have a boat there that was built by a man in the late 70s, a man called Tim Severn. And Tim Severn in the late 70s decided he was going to actually replicate an old Irish curragh in the way that it is described in the ancient early medieval stories about Brendan's navigation, about Brendan's voyage. So Tim Severn decided he was going to build this boat and head out west and see where he would see where the boat would take him. And he went from Ireland all the way across to North America, and proving that it was true, because one of the great things about St. Brendan is that he was the first European to land in North America. That's one of the stories there. So, and there was a beautiful piece of music by an Irish composer, Sean Davey, called The Brendan Voyage as well, which was composed at the same time. So the story is alive. It's as alive today as it was 1,500 years ago. The story is as alive today as it was 1,500 years ago. So Seamus Heaney also resurrects this story in this amazing little poem that he has called The Disappearing Island. The Disappearing Island. And indeed, that is what this, in a way, that's what a story is too. A story is like an island, a whale that appears, and then the story is finished and it disappears. But the memory is there and the promise is there that it'll return again when we need it at the time. These Zoom chats are this island that appears and then submerges. But the memory and the promise of this gathering is always here again. So Heaney, anyway, treats of that mystery, of this phenomenon, in the most mystical way I could imagine. In a way, actually, I haven't even fully interpreted myself, but I love this poem so much. And if there was ever a poem, people often ask, you know, is there a poem I should learn off by heart? This is a great one to learn off by heart. It's small, it has a lovely story to it, and an amazing rhythm and internal rhyme. So this is a great one, Seamus Heaney, The Disappearing Island. Once we had presumed to found ourselves for good. Once we had presumed to found ourselves for good between its blue hills and those sandless shores where we spent our desperate night in prayer and vigil. Once we had gathered driftwood, made a hearth, and hung our cauldron like a flame, the island broke beneath us like a wave. The land sustaining us seemed to hold firm only when we embraced it in extremis. All I believe that happened there was vision. Heaney uses the word there, in extremis, the Latin term, in extremis, at the most extreme moment, at the point of death, actually, that extreme moment between this world and the next world, the ultimate point of threshold, in extremis. Once we had presumed to found ourselves for good between its blue hills and those sandless shores where we spent our desperate night in prayer and vigil. Where we spent our desperate night in prayer and vigil. Once we had gathered driftwood, made a hearth, and hung our cauldron like a flame, the island broke beneath us like a wave. That land sustaining us, this land sustaining us, seems to hold firm only when we embraced it in extremis. All I believe that happened there was vision.
Lovely.
That's really lovely, Owen. Thank you. A large part of the story, when I think of a story, Owen, I'm often reminded of our own personal story of going to America ourselves. When we moved to New York from our home in County Tipperary around, 6 or 7 years ago now, 7 years ago maybe. And also at our own expression of our own story in terms of our musical identity. And living in Ireland and in our home with Noreen and our father, Micheál, who we're going to speak a little bit about today. They were very renowned Irish traditional musicians and experts in musicology and sacred song. So naturally, when I became a teenager, I threw myself headlong into rap and hip hop as a way of expressing myself. And Owen threw himself headlong into grunge and folky singer-songwriter, angsty guitar-toting songwriting. And I was always struck by, it took ourselves arriving in New York and performing to realize how much of this ancient story we had within ourselves, how much of our inheritance we were representing without actually knowing we were. And I'm struck at how, in a sense, I was saying it at the beginning of this session, that we are too close to our own story to really realize what we are doing. And as we go through our lives, we have to return to the things that we left, and that leaving the home place or familiarity can really open our eyes to what we are actually carrying and what we are proud to carry. Not that I've left the rap and hip hop side of myself behind, not at all, really. I actually did a master's in ethnomusicology myself. I actually, for my undergraduate degree, I did a Bachelor of Music in University College Cork, which was the same music department that both my mother, Noreen, and father graduated from, in which they actually met as well. And then I did a master's 4 years later at the Dámh, the Academy, the Irish World Academy of Music and Dance at the University of Limerick. And I did a master's in ethnomusicology. And I found my field in Irish rap music in the southwest of Ireland. So that was a way for me to break out into my own field of expertise. And it was such a joy that an old Irish story, really, an old Irish dynamic of leaving home to realize how much of home we were actually representing, and how much our home places are, in a sense, misleading us to all of our story. So I find myself constantly now returning to Irish traditional music and poetry most recently. And it's all the more poignant since we lost our father. He passed away now around 2 years ago. So I wanted to read a poem dedicated to him right now, to our father Micheál O'Sullivan, who was a great icon of Irish traditional and Irish classical music, and very much a eccentric, nutty professor type. And we learned a lot of how to hold ourselves in the world from him. And this is a poem I wrote called "For My Father." The endless well of grief, tectonic affection, and seismic loss you are to me. A different wing beat now, a different wind. Oh, why we die defines how we must live. And love we did, and find to stand on holy ground. We must not talk too much, nor try and know our own mind. We were headed for the miracle, but no matter now. Time has made clear what scans could not show. Allow space for celebration. You are staring unblinking, the healing icon. My wandering eyes on yours, our every tear the same temperature, come from the same place. I always break you down, you say, and I know I have the skeleton key to your heart, and now my own heart too. I had it all along, and now finally, nowhere is out of reach between us. For the endless well of grief, tectonic affection and seismic loss you are to me. A different wing beat now, a different wind. Oh, why we die defines how we must live, and love we did and find. To stand on holy ground we must not talk too much, nor try and know our own mind. We were headed for the miracle. But no matter now, time has made clear what scans could not show. Allow space for celebration. You are staring, unblinking, the healing icon, my wondering eyes on yours, our every tear the same temperature, come from the same place. I always break you down. You say, and I know, I hold the skeleton key to your heart, and now my own heart too. I had it all along, and now finally nowhere is out of reach between us. Our father is so central to our story, and he was one of his expertise, and his performance style also crossed many boundaries and amalgamated many things. And it's interesting that you brought up Brendan the Navigator there, Owen, because Brendan would have sailed from the River Shannon out into the sea, from the fresh water to the salt water. And one of the central themes of our father's academic theses about Irish music and music in the local and the global was the river meeting the sea. And I often find that metaphor very much incarnates or is incarnational of my own story as well, and my own attitude and my own what's happened to me in the last decade and a half since choosing to hold the art form as my way in the world. And really, I suppose our story is dictated by whatever we choose to break the waves in our life. That our stories are often as a result of what we've chosen for another reason. Mostly consciously, this is not a problem. But sometimes we make the decision that this thing that we hold tightest is often more important than our own story. So let our story tell itself, as long as we can hold this central thread, which for me would be music and poetry, I suppose, performance, laughter, making people laugh at any cost. And but often our father would have loved these online sessions. He used to love tradition and innovation. He would love to know that we were speaking to you all from our own disparate geographical places and creating a new community, and speaking about story and heart and using the ancient in tandem with the modern to create a new understanding. So
he was a great teacher and a founder of a school too. So it's wonderful to be sort of following in the in the family business here with Noreen.
You're right.
I have some photos here on the desktop. This is one of him. This is one of him with Seamus Heaney. Can you see that?
Yeah, we can.
And that's when Seamus Heaney was getting an honorary doctorate from the University of Limerick. And
Owen, could you turn up your volume a little bit, please? People are asking.
Are you able to hear me okay, are you?
I can hear you okay.
Yeah. I think if I turn up my volume anymore, it might distort. That's the only problem.
Okay.
So
okay.
What I could do is, are you able to hear me though? Okay, are you?
Oh, yeah, I'm able to hear you. Just I see in the chat over and over again that there's someone asking to.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
What does it sound? What does it sound like?
Yeah, it sounds fine to me.
Carolyn says, "Owen, your volume is low." Is anyone else having a problem with the volume? No. Okay. I hear you very well.
Okay.
Maybe just, I don't know, Carolyn, maybe just turn it up or something. I don't know. Cool. If I turn up my microphone anymore, it distorts. So I won't.
Great. No.
I won't
Excuse
do
me.
that.
No one's going wrong. So yeah, that's him. And I suppose that would have been in Queen's University, Belfast.
No. That's in Limerick. That's the University of Limerick.
Okay.
That's when Seamus Heaney was getting an honorary doctorate there at the University of Limerick. And Micheál, our father, was giving the official address for that. There he is. He's a young fella. And this is in our old family home in Dromore there. And Noreen decided it would be a great idea to get some peacocks. Yeah.
All sorts of animals. All sorts
of animals. But the peacocks used to follow us around and look in the windows like weird dinosaurs.
And talking about songs, they certainly had
They used to scream like strangulated children. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, they were great. And we had, what did we have? We had chickens, we had guinea fowl, 12 guinea fowl.
Ducks,
we had geese.
Sheep. We had 2 donkeys, remember? Josie, a snowdrop. And
we had
goats,
sheep.
But we had the goats as well, lads. Do you remember the goats?
The goats, yeah.
They got gout. The poor old goats got gout in their feet, so we had to put them down.
They did. We had to put them down. But then Molly made a Bowron.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, my Bowron is here somewhere. I think it's downstairs. We got a goat made out of them, yeah. Our dad had and Noreen had them skinned. Who did you get to skin that goat, Noreen?
Who did it? I don't know who skinned the goat.
Probably through Paul Hogan, I think, somebody.
Someone came and skinned the goat, and then we had to hang the goat skin outside in one of the sheds.
But then we forgot it. Yeah, it was gruesome. We forgot about it, and then we realized then we brought it in, but he was just about to make a drum out of it, just able to make a drum out of it, even though the skin was rather thin. But that was 12 years ago or something, and the drummer's still here with me. That's the drum many of you have seen me play, so it's the same.
And to put in a little song here, we have a song about goats. I'll give you a little best of it. Tá gáirín buí agam mis min seapáine brisin siad an críanam áúirtó bhaile níl áte gan na cruúing iad ach híasam mata ligan am mata sías I bhar an natin. Didn't sing that for 60 years.
There you go, Noreen. It's very nice.
It's a lovely little Tá gáirín buí. I have 2 goats. And when I milk them into my father's hat, the hat leaks and I've no milk left.
Nice. Hallelujah Gauna as well, Noreen, isn't it?
Ah, yes, that's a lovely one too.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
I don't know it.
I don't really know it.
Hallelujah Gauna Rapona. Hallelujah Gauna be the balm. Hallelujah, gonna Calabon. It's a lovely little song, actually. We must sing that. It's lovely.
Yeah, it's really nice. Yeah.
So, Molly, did you want to do a small little bit of beatbox or something to going back to your little?
Sure thing, yeah, sure thing. I suppose since we're talking about a bit of hip hop, there's a great. Many of you would have seen me do a little bit of vocal percussion, but not everybody has gotten a beatbox lesson actually. So I could teach you one or two of the rudiments of vocal percussion. I started as a drummer. Both my parents bought me a drum kit when I was about 11 or 12, I'd say. So they're very patient people. And there's basically only 3 noises in vocal percussion in hip hop. So there's a kick drum, which is now I go, which anyone can do, and then you put an F on it. So you go, okay, try that. Nice. And that F goes straight into your second noise, which is a t, 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 which is a tis, tis, tis. Try it. T, t, t. So if I was to do the 2 of them together, it would go. T, t. The third noise is just a simple sound, which is an exhaling K sound. And then once we get that simplicity done, I can teach you the real snare sound. That's your snare, the drum roll sound. So the 3 noises would be number 1, which is number 2, which is, and number 3, which is. So if we were to do the 3 of them together, it would be. Okay. Easy. But in music, as many of you know, there are 4 beats in every bar. Most 99.9% of hip hop is in 4/4. Not many waltzy hip hop numbers out there. So there's only 3 noises, yet there's 4 beats. So we have to repeat one of the noises. And the noise we always repeat is the t, 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 the middle one. So we go. Now, if you're not making a lot of noise, don't worry, because it gets a lot louder the more you practice. A lot of you out there will know. A lot of you out there actually are, in the process of reinventing yourself for the 5th or 6th time. So you can now reinvent yourself as a rapper, hip hop artist, vocal percussionist, whatever you wish, performance artist. All you have to do is do this naked with a bucket of paint, and you can get paid a lot of money.
I think we should unmute everybody and have like a Zoom beatbox chorus, right? A Zoom beatbox chorus of chaos.
Cool.
Okay. So I'm going to unmute everyone
down.
and then follow Mo, or we'll just have to remember what Molly was doing, and let's go for it. Here we go. Yeah. Go.
Beautiful.
Okay, there we go. That was
beautiful.
That was recorded for posterity as well too. That we'll always have that now.
That'll end up in the Irish National Museum up there now, beside the Lochgar Shield.
There's no doubt about it. In the Traditional Music Archive. Yeah, I'll send it up to Nicholas Carlin.
Yeah, let me do a few tricks then, just to show you what the path before you looks like, novices of percussion. And so you can just double up and go. And then the sound is me inhaling both sides of the back of my tongue with a silly smile on my face. Like that. So. Hedge school. My corona. No, 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 no. That's all I got. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
That's nice, Stephen and Bella down there. That's that brilliant piano player on the Australian fella with that mad look in his eye that we met with David White in Ireland there a couple of years ago.
Yeah. I know. Amazing to see you guys there. I know.
So nice.
It's amazing. I mean, there's always between 80 and 90 people on these calls, so we can't actually say hello to everyone.
Tuscany too.
Yeah, because but it's just so beautiful to see everyone there. So many wonderful people here with us. Yeah,
really sweet. Yeah, so many stories. A lot of stories in the room.
A lot of stories.
Exactly. And maybe as a little transition, I might just go back on that actually, because I've just been trawling down through your comments. They're so beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Monday, keep singing and invite us to sing. Molly, will you tell us what that tapestry is behind you?
I will. That is a story, a tapestry of a story that goes, it meets in the middle, but you bought that when you went to India, Noreen, in the early 90s, either before you brought me or else after, because my parents brought me to India in 1994 when I was 8 years old. In 1992, when I was 8 years old, which is a really silly idea, but they did it for 3 weeks because my parents were doing 6 concerts around the Horn of India in 6 different cities for the Irish Embassy. They had done a tour, a cultural exchange tour with India for the Irish Embassy 2 or 3 times, and they brought me sometime. So that is from there. That's an artifact from then.
You see, Owen was in boarding school that time, you see, and so he was looked after. But we had nobody to look after poor old Molly, so we said, look, we'll take him with us. We'll take Imeall with us. And he was so lovely because the stories,
myself.
we could be here all day. Oh, listen, you did, you were lovely. And you see, like in India, so some people know, when you go to hotels, when you stay in hotels, the big thing is if it's your birthday, and they make a big hoo-ha about it and meet you at the gate, at the door, and they do have a birthday cake and everything. So every hotel we used to go, we were with Mel Mercier, and of course he's a great trickster. And so every hotel we go into, he'd say, oh, it's Imeall, it's little Imeall's birthday today, you see. So every hotel we went into every night, different hotel every night, we'd be met at the door and we'd have birthday cakes, and all the guests would come over to Molly and they'd be, saying congratulations and happy birthday to you. And then I remember another lovely moment. We were driving along in one of these little rickshaws kind of thing, in India, chaos, of course. And so we were driving along and there was crowds of people all over the place. And the minute you stop, you see, you'd have to, you'd be stopped by traffic on all sides. And all the handicapped, the disabled people would come up, and they'd come, they'd want to you to give them money or whatever, which would only be just whatever, a few old, what was it? Rupees. But anyway, one time we were stopped at the and you see the drivers would tell us, now don't engage with them at all. And so, but Molly didn't like this at all, and he'd say, here come the homeless again. He'd come and we'd always remember that. It was really nice. But we had great fun, actually.
It was very traumatic, actually, and it's one thing that it was a real gift to me to experience a impoverished society before I became a teenager, before the ego took over in my psyche, I think, because when you're a kid, you're just looking at things as they are. You're not judging, in a sense. And I was able to go and experience all of that and not necessarily be too traumatized by it, and realize that we can live with so much less than we have.
So Tuesday then, the love letters that came in were just lovely again. Barbara looking for some limericks. Yeah, we might do that, all right. Ruby talking about the stars. We'll probably be back to Ruby again.
Oh,
Lovely things around listening. Like, when you're out to count the sounds. I loved that. And also when you're out to pressing each foot on the ground with love, And then there was lovely ones there from Mary Jo about drawing your attention. Keep drawing it in through the listening until you hear your heartbeat. Very beautiful. Then somebody said Hail Mary, that when she was a child, that the Hail Mary, she used to say, Hail Mary, full of grapes. Instead of full of grace. I loved that one. And it reminded me of our youth, because we used to say, Hail Mary, full of grace. The cat fell down and broke his face. Holy Mary, Mother of God. If I was your mother, I'd give you the rod. That's the Hail Mary we used to have.
Wow.
Somebody, a few people actually asked about keening, lamentation, and we'd love to cover that. But of course, Easter is the ideal time. So we will be dealing with that over Easter, because Mary is at the foot of the cross. And in the Irish tradition, we hold that Mary was the very first keening woman at the foot of the cross. So all we'll be dealing with is beautiful songs, recordings. People wanted that. Orla, I've sent off your little card to our Kathy from Orla. Somebody said Straight to Heaven House. They were talking about Imeall, the thing, and somebody said her house is called Straight to Heaven House because the idea is that a mother of twins, obviously twins in that house, goes straight to heaven. And I think we identify that because I have a niece who has twins, and I go to mind them once a week. Or I did go to mind them until all of this chaos, and I really miss my twins. I was dreaming of them last night, actually. I was dreaming of them last night. Then Michael Long came up with a nice book, Ancestral Medicine, Daniel Four. And then Wednesday, to Bridget. Somebody wanted a little message. Gawe mal to Breda, in Vanilla Heron, in Vanlega Theory, Malish Mishkaleri. And all the things that you're going to do. Smile came up a lot. That we're going to smile at people, even people that don't smile at us. And that's very much a Buddhist practice. Buddha said, if you can't smile, at least wear half a smile. So another one, somebody else said, keep the door opened. And I was thinking of that beautiful poem. We haven't time to go into it now because we have other things to do. But time is flying today for some reason. But I was thinking of that beautiful, The Guest House, Rumi, that poem there, where every guest is a messenger. And every guest is a gift. Christ says that too. And indeed the monasteries say that every guest is Christ. And it's great because if someone knocks on your door, you say, oh Jesus, who's this? Can't stand this at all. But then when you let them in, you always know that they've brought you a gift and they're going away with a blessing. Pee away into the light and make rainbows. Ron, that's a great one. We were talking about pee. So he says, pee into the light and make rainbows. And then somebody was talking about the rainbow light. Other people like the interfaith too. And that very much is. Then Marcella, you said that we were singing Jerusalem one time, that we sang it together in the bus. And what you said was, I remember we were sinning together. You left out the G, so that I thought that was sinning together. Singing together. Because I often say, Lord, be merciful to me, not a sinner, but a singer. So Molly keeps singing. So anyway, that was a lot of but an awful lot more came in too that I didn't get a chance to go through. But I want to take you now into a story. I want you to listen to this story very carefully, because we'll be breaking you up after this, and to see what these three characters have to say to you. Is there any of them that you'd like? That might be a little exercise that we might send you away with this evening. There are three characters in this story, and maybe you might write to one of them. Owen, would you introduce the story?
I will a little bit, just a little bit. And so it's a short story by James Joyce, and it's from his first publication, which is a collection of short stories called Dubliners. There it is, Noreen has it. is holding it up there. It's called Dubliners, and it is a very, very beautiful and very accessible collection of stories, because Joyce can, the later Joyce's work can be very obscure, but Dubliners is very, very readable, and I'd recommend any of you to read it. It's fabulous. And Joyce wrote it at the impossible, excruciatingly amazing age. He was in his early to mid 20s when he wrote these stories. And you'll hear now this story called The Dead. And the depth of the psychological accuracy of this is just overwhelming for a person in their 20s. So the story is, the main character is a man called Gabriel, and he's a journalist, and he's married to Greta, who's a country girl from Galway. And every year they go to his aunt's house at Christmas time, and they stay in a very fancy hotel there in Dublin. And so this story recounts that evening there in a home in Dublin City. So, and it's called The Dead, and yeah, I could go into it more, but I think really Noreen's extract that she's going to read is more than enough around it.
And to top and tail it, you might show an excerpt from a film that was made by John Huston around it. It's a little novella. This story is a little novella. It's longer than a short story, so I'm only going to read you an excerpt of it at the end of it. But if you could, this is the kernel of the story, because the story is all around the memory that music can bring, and that music can unlock secrets that would sometimes never be revealed. So I wonder, would that be possible, Oni? And then you could.
Would you like me to do it now or when you're finished, Nora?
Both, because it's about that song.
Okay, great. Here we go. Hang on a sec here now.
And I'll be going to fade it out.
Okay, great.
If you'll be the last offering, as I'm taking you to be, tell me the first token that passed between you and me. Oh, don't you remember that night on yon lean hill, when we both met together, which I'm sorry now to tell. Oh, the rain falls on my heavy locks, and the dew wets my skin. My babe lies cold within my arms, but none will let me in.
No.
Gabriel threw his overcoat and hat on a couch and crossed the room towards the window. He looked down into the street in order that his emotion might calm a little. Then he turned and leaned against a chest of drawers with his back to the light. Greta had taken off her hat and coat and was standing before a large swinging mirror. Gabriel paused for a few moments, watching her, and then said, "Greta." She turned away from the mirror slowly and walked along the shaft of light towards him. Her face looked so serious and weary that Gabriel could not speak. No, it was not the moment yet. "You look tired," he said. "I am a little," she answered. "You don't feel ill or weak?" "No, tired, that's all." She went to the window and stood there looking out. Gabriel waited again, and then, fearing that diffidence was about to conquer him, he said abruptly, "By the way, Greta." "What is it?" "You know that fellow Mellons?" he said quickly. "Yes. What about him?" "Well, poor fellow. He's a decent sort of chap, all right," continued Gabriel in a false voice. "He gave me back that sovereign I lent him, and I didn't expect it really." He was trembling now with annoyance. Why did she seem so abstracted? He did not know how he could begin. Was she annoyed, too, about something? If she would only turn to him or come to him of her own accord. To take her as she was would be brutal. No, he must see some ardour in her eyes first. He longed to be master of her strange mood. He longed to be master of her strange mood. "When did you lend him the £1?" she asked after a pause. Gabriel strove to restrain himself from breaking out into brutal language about Mellons and his £1. He longed to cry to her from his soul, to crush her body against his, to overmaster her. But he said, "Oh, at Christmas, when he opened that little Christmas card shop in Henry Street." He was in such a fever of rage and desire that he did not hear her come from the window. She stood before him for an instant, looking at him strangely, then suddenly raising herself on tiptoe and resting her hands lightly on his shoulders, she kissed him. "You're a very generous person, Gabriel," she said. Gabriel, trembling with delight at her sudden kiss and at the quaintness of her phrase, put his hands on her hair and began smoothing it back, scarcely touching it with his fingers. The washing had made it fine and brilliant. His heart was brimming over with happiness. Just what he was wishing for. She had come to him of her own accord. Perhaps her thoughts had been with his. Perhaps she felt the impetuous desire that was in him, and then the yielding mood had come over her. Now that she had fallen so easily, he wondered why he had been so diffident. He stood holding her head between his hands, then slipping one arm swiftly about her body and drawing her towards him, he said softly, "Greta, what are you thinking about?" She did not answer, nor yield his arm. He said again softly, "Tell me, what is it, Greta? I think I know what is the matter. Do I know?" She did not answer at once. Then she said, in an outburst of tears, "Oh, I'm thinking about that song, 'The Lass of Aughrim.'" She broke loose from him and ran to the bed, and throwing her arms across the bed rail, hid her face. Gabriel stood stock still for a moment in astonishment, and then followed her. As he passed in the way of the cheval glass, he caught sight of himself in full length, his broad, well-filled shirt front, the face whose expression always puzzled him when he saw it in a mirror, and his glimmering, gilt-rimmed eyeglasses. He halted a few paces from her and said, what about the song? Why does that make you cry? She raised her head from her arms and dried her eyes with the back of her hand like a child. A kinder note than he had intended went into his voice. Why, Greta? He asked. I'm thinking about a person long ago who used to sing that song. And who was the person long ago? Asked Gabriel. It was a person I used to know in Galway when I was living with my grandmother, she said. A smile passed away from Gabriel's face. A dull anger began to gather again at the back of his mind, and the dull fires of his lust began to glow angrily in his veins. Someone you were in love with? He asked ironically. It was a young boy I used to know, she answered, named Michael Fury. He used to sing that song, The Lass of Aughrim. He was very delicate. Gabriel was silent. He did not wish her to think that he was interested in this delicate boy. I can see him so plainly, she said after a moment. Such eyes as he had. Big, dark eyes. And such an expression in them. An expression. Oh, then you were in love with him? Asked Gabriel. I used to go out walking with him when I was in Galway, she said. A thought flew across Gabriel's mind. Perhaps that's why you wanted to go to Galway with that Ivors girl that you mentioned earlier, he said coldly. She looked at him and asked in surprise, what for? Her eyes made Gabriel feel awkward. He shrugged his shoulders and said, how do I know? To see him, perhaps. She looked away from him along the shaft of light towards the window in silence. He's dead, she said at length. He died when he was only 17. Isn't it a terrible thing to die so young as that? What was he? Asked Gabriel, still ironically. He was in the gasworks, she said. Gabriel felt humiliated by the failure of his irony and by the evocation of this figure from the dead, a boy in the gasworks. While he had been full of memories of their secret life together, full of tenderness and joy and desire, she had been comparing him in her mind with another. A shameful consciousness of his own person assailed him. He saw himself as a ludicrous figure, acting as a penny boy for his aunts, a nervous, well-meaning sentimentalist, orating to vulgarians and idealizing his own clownish lusts, the pitiable, fatuous fellow he had caught a glimpse of in the mirror. Instinctively, he turned his back more to the light, lest she might see the shame that burned upon his forehead. He tried to keep up his tone of cold interrogation, but his voice, when he spoke, was humble and indifferent. I suppose you were in love with this Michael Fury, Greta, he said. It was great with him at that time, she said. Her voice was veiled and sad. Gabriel, feeling now how vain it would be to try to lead her whither he had purposed, caressed one of her hands and said sadly, and what did he die so young of, Greta? Consumption, was it? I think he died for me, she answered. A vague terror seized Gabriel at this answer, as if at that hour he had hoped to triumph. Some impalpable and vindictive being was coming against him, gathering forces against him in its vague world. But he shook himself free of it in an effort of reason and continued to caress her hand. He did not question her again, for he felt that she would tell her of herself. Her hand was warm and moist. It did not respond to his touch, but he continued to caress it. It was in the winter, she said, about the beginning of the winter, when I was going to leave my grandmother's and come up here to the convent to be educated. And he was ill at the time in his lodgings in Galway and wouldn't be let out. And his people in Oughterard were written to. He was in decline, they said, or something like that. I never knew rightly. She paused for a moment and sighed. Poor fella, she said, he was very fond of me. And he was such a gentle boy. We used to go out together walking, you know, like they do in the country. He was going to study singing, only for his health. He had a very good voice. Poor Michael Fury. Well, and then, asked Gabriel. And then when it came for the time for me to leave Galway and come up to the convent, he was much worse, and I wouldn't be let see him. So I wrote him a letter saying I was going up to Dublin and would be back in the summer, and hoping he would be better then. She paused for a moment to get her voice under control and then went on. Then the night before I left, I was in my grandmother's house in Nuns Island packing up, and I heard gravel thrown up against the window. The window was so wet I couldn't see. So I ran downstairs as I was and slipped out into the back, into the garden. And there was the poor fella at the end of the garden, shivering. And did you not tell him to go back? Asked Gabriel. I implored of him to go home at once and told him he'd get his death in the rain. But he said he did not want to live. I could see his eyes as well. He was standing at the end of the wall where there was a tree. And did he go home? Asked Gabriel. Yes, he went home. And when I was only a week in the convent, he died and was buried in Oughterard, where his people came from. Oh, the day I heard that. Oh, the day I heard that he was dead. She stopped, choking with sobs and overcome by emotion, flung herself downward on the bed, sobbing in the quilt. Gabriel held her hand for a moment, and then, shy of intruding on her grief, let it fall gently and walked quietly to the window. She was fast asleep. Gabriel, leaning on his elbow, looked for a few moments unresentfully on her tangled hair and half-open mouth, listening to her deep-drawn breath. So she had that romance in her life. A man had died for her sake. It hardly pained him now to think how poor a part he, her husband, had played in her life. He watched her while she slept, as though he and she had never lived together as man and wife. His curious eyes rested long upon her face and on her hair, and as he thought of what she must have been in that time of her first girlish beauty, a strange, friendly pity for her entered his soul. He did not like to say, even to himself, that her face was no longer beautiful, but he knew that it was no longer the face for which Michael Fury had braved death. Perhaps she had not told him all the story. His eyes moved to the chair over which she had thrown her clothes. He had caught that haggard look upon her face for a moment. Soon, perhaps, he would be sitting in the drawing room of his aunt, dressed in black, his silk hat on his knees. The blinds would be drawn down, and Aunt Kate would be sitting beside him crying and blowing her nose and telling him how Julia had died. He would cast about in his mind for some words that might console her, and would find only lame and useless ones. Yes, that would happen very soon. The air of the room chilled his shoulders. He stretched himself cautiously along under the sheets and lay down beside his wife. One by one, they were all becoming shades. Better pass boldly into that other world in the full glory of some passion than fade and wither dismally with age. Better pass boldly into that other world in the full glory of some passion than fade and wither dismally with age. He thought of how she, who lay, had locked in her heart for so many years that image of her lover's eyes when he had told her that he did not wish to live. Generous tears filled Gabriel's eyes. He had never felt like that towards any woman, but he knew that such a feeling must be love. The tears gathered more thickly in his eyes, and in the partial darkness, he imagined he saw the form of a young man standing under a dripping tree. Other forms were near. His soul had approached that region where dwell the vast bones of the dead. He was conscious of, but could not apprehend their wayward and flickering existence. His own identity was fading out into a grey, impalpable world, the solid world itself, which these dead had one time reared and lived in, that was dissolving and dwindling. A few light taps upon the pane made him turn to the window. It had begun to snow again. He watched sleepily the flakes, silver and dark, falling obliquely against the lamplight. The time had come for him to set out on his journey. Yes, the newspapers were right. Snow was general all over Ireland. It was falling on every part of the dark central plain, on the treeless hills, falling softly upon the bog of Allen, and further westward, softly falling into the dark, mutinous Shannon waves. It was falling too upon every part of the lonely churchyard on the hill where Michael Fury lay buried. It lay thickly drifted on the crooked crosses and headstones, on the spears of the little gate, on the barren thorns. His soul swooned slowly as he heard the snow falling faintly through the universe, and faintly falling, like the descent of their last end upon all the living and the dead.
You'll be the last of Auckland as I'm taking you mean to be. Tell me the first token that passed between you and me. Oh, don't you remember that night on yon
Angelica, don't you see there? And it was her father who directed that. And so there was a follow up to that story of the dead for me. And so I just read you a small bit from my autobiography.
So that's Angelica Houston there, Nora, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can hold on to her. You can hold on to her for a minute.
Yeah.
On 16th of December 1996, the Academy Award-winning actress Angelica Houston orchestrated an evening of Irish prose, poetry and song at the Mark Taper Forum in Los Angeles. She invited me to perform, to weave song in and out of the evening a half dozen times, while she, her godfather Gregory Peck, and the actors Gabriel Byrne and Fionnuala Flanagan did their beautiful presentations. Blessings were abundant during those 2 days in Los Angeles with Angelica. Michael Fitzgerald, the man who collected me at the airport, he was actually an old boy of Glenstone, announced that Angelica had invited us to dinner at her home in downtown Venice, along with her husband, the Mexican sculptor Robert Graham. Wild with excitement, I was also aware of the incongruity of it all, because here was I wearing this gaudy, snowy, synthetic fur jacket that I had bought earlier that day in a sale in a New York store, just about to meet a one-time model and now acclaimed actress in her extraordinary abode. But it was a glorious evening, full of fun, light and pure energy. Out of the car and up to the front door, which was set into a huge wall that hid the facade of their breathtaking house, designed by the very handsome Robert and adorned with many of his stunning human figure sculptures. I'm sure some of you know his work. I had no idea that he was one of America's most acclaimed and respected artists. And yet I'd yet to meet this celebrity who was in the kitchen cooking our pizza supper. But we were instantly soul sisters, even down to our birth dates. She was born on the 12th of May, 1951. I was born the 12th of June, 1951. Supper over, there was the privilege of that dreamy evening. Robert came, brought us into his studio, and we stood in awe of these beautiful human masterpieces. I could not silence the song in my heart and burst forth into the greatest song of salvation from the Christian tradition, the Magnificat. I sang, blown away by the yearning which his imagination had created within me. The following day, the day of the concert, brought its own angelic magic. A sound rehearsal was scheduled for 1 p.m. on the stage of this downtown Los Angeles theatre, with a full dress rehearsal around 4. This level of meticulous preparation was strange to me, and I longed for the freedom, the playing by ear, which my own performances and our performances breathed by. This was a theatrical production with no room for improvisation. So the timing of the songs, the exact position on the stage was very well defined in advance, and any deviation would throw the entire evening out of kilter. I wouldn't make a good actor. After my rehearsal, I was shown to my rehearsal room to await the call of the complete run-through. I glanced down through the programme and was amazed to see that Angelica's 2 choices were an excerpt from The Dead and a poem by Yeats. I had known, I'll skip now because we're running out of time. So then we did that, but back to the Hollywood manifestation of another greatness. For me, for the first time at the performance and the rehearsal, the cliche of someone stealing the show made perfect sense. Angelica was the thief of the day and night, both in rehearsal and in the moment. She embodied there and then the person of Greta. She cried her eyes out, both at rehearsal and during the live performance. The few of us listeners in that darkened auditorium during the rehearsal, we did so too. This was a lifelong lesson for me that has lingered. There's no such thing as a dress rehearsal in life. God is always listening for the true, real heart of the character.
Really nice, Nora.
And of course, she's become a great friend. She gave me a little cameo role in one of her films and asked me again to sing that Magnificat in it. But that's another entirely different story. But now all of that was, our time really flew on us today, was our idea that you'd break out now and maybe share a story of yours, or maybe your reaction to the Dead there, because it's a very powerful story here about how we never really know what's going on in anybody else's head, how we can't presume that we know anything, how I suppose Gabriel, even though he was boorish enough, yes, he did pull back and he did listen to her desires. So maybe only do that again, that little break out magic
Great.
that you did.
Yeah.
And
excellent.
for about 10 minutes, maybe.
Good.
Lovely.
So just to be clear there, what's the question again, Nora? Tell us.
Just anything about story, really, because I was thinking that the exercise for this evening might be around a letter that you might write to either Gabriel, to Greta, or to Michael Fury. What would you want to say to them? What would you want to tell them, even about yourself? What did they spark off in you? Because as Owen said at the very beginning, a story is only a story insofar as it lives in your heart. And that we're responding to every story and we're going along and being tossed and torn by it. So it's just to react to the whole idea of storytelling, or maybe that did it bring up anything for you that you'd like to share with anybody?
Okay, here we go. Right, so we're about 80 people, I think. So let's see if I pick about 40 rooms. Okay, so you're going to see an option to join one of these breakout rooms that will appear, and I think you have to click on that in order to go to a room. So if you see join breakout room button there, you have to press that in order to be assigned automatically to these rooms. So I'm going to click the button now, and we're going to give you, will we try 10 minutes, Nora?
Yeah, five each kind of thing, if you could.
And then I'll give you the 60-second countdown like yesterday.
But you could talk about anything. We're just throwing out. You can admire somebody, say, "Oh God, I love that. I love that blouse you're wearing there. I love that." Can be anything.
Okay, here we go. See you later, guys.
That was beautiful chaos. Wonderful.
Wasn't that great?
That was really nice. Yeah.
And I hope
I
everyone
hope.
who wanted to, or who
Yeah.
didn't want to be part of, was able to stay out, and anyone who
Well, you just
wanted to,
don't click the join button, you know?
yeah, yeah.
Fine.
If you just,
And yeah, that's so much fun. I'd Mary Porter, and she was saying, yeah, New York City is so quiet, and that Noreen was reading that extract from the dead, which is a deathly silent
yeah,
extract. And the only thing you can hear in New York City is the ambulances, you know, just going to and from their business. And,
yeah.
yeah. So
Good.
great stillness over there.
How's Mary doing?
Mary is doing really well. Yeah, she's doing really well. She's still in touch with Hugo and Evie. We're supposed to house swap with her, believe it or not. Hugo is a guy who helps us on our tours. Some of you may have met him.
Uh-huh.
Mary won a trip to Paris for 2 weeks in a raffle. So she was going to head to Paris, but her plans were scuppered. So she's brought the Seine to New York. The Seine.
Let's see, is Noreen back?
I wonder. Is she muted?
No,
Nice one, Kathy. Yeah.
I don't think she's back yet. But
How could she not be back?
maybe she's still in her room. Oh, there she is. Hang on. No, there
Can't.
she is. Sorry, Nora,
There she
I
is.
had you muted.
Lovely. And
That was
just to
great.
say hello to everybody and your patience. We just have one very important little input before we let you go, and that is from our youngest pilgrim, our youngest member of the retinue, member of the Dámh, which is Ruby there with her little poem to her heart. If you hear this, sit back and listen.
Hello, Ruby. How are you doing?
Hello.
Oh, lovely. Good.
Well, Ruby sent us on the most beautiful poem that she wrote yesterday, and we were wondering if you would read it for us, Ruby.
Oh, sure. Here, let me go get it.
Oh, we thought you were going to go
Hang on,
grab
it's in the other room.
it. It is beautiful.
Good.
Ruby is,
How's it going, Kristen?
Oh, fantastic. This has been everything for us. I can't even tell you. I mean, you guys have been, the three of you. I saw you with David White many years ago, and got an album and came home with a CD for Ruby. So we've been getting a lot of like emotional support from you for a long time. But this every day, getting up and these beautiful invitations for us to write these letters, and yeah, this has been great.
Lovely.
Getting us through. It's really, really getting us through so much.
Yes.
We love it.
Tough time. It's
been a poet and an artist and a musician and since she was very tiny and started to talk.
Really? Yeah.
She spoke before she was a year old, so she's an
Amazing.
interesting human on the planet.
The words.
She's a
The words.
Nice. Pictures. She drew pictures of these characters.
Tell us a bit about yourself, Ruby.
I am a person. What about me?
You have a great sense of humor.
I do. I have a great sense of humor. I'm Irish.
Yeah.
I am Irish. I have an American accent. I know. I wish I didn't. I don't like it. But I'm Irish. I am Irish. Don't worry.
So we laugh a lot.
Well, we're proud of you, and we're going to be looking out for this space, for Ruby's space. And we'll say we saw her when she was 14 and we knew it was going to happen. So will you give us a blast of your heart work? It's very beautiful.
Thank you. A letter to my heart. Dear heart, I remember when I would lean against my father's chest and hear a beating, a pulsing, a flame springing, leaping, prancing to life, small but strong. I remember. Dear heart, if you were to know the ways with which I carry you, for we hold our hearts so tightly in our hands. Dear heart, thank you for always beating. Thank you for knowing who I am. Thank you for reminding me that even in the darkest dark, a candle is burning bravely, fiercely on. A light, a glimmer, a hope. Dear heart, once I walked through a field of flowers. I stood and looked at the stars. I listened. I waited for you. And there, in the stillness and the pulsing, shining silence, you found me. You woke me up. You moved me without a step. You sang me your beautiful song. Dear heart, I am growing older now, and a candle may soon go out. I am broken and mended and patched up gently. I am bruised and I am bandaged. I have loved bravely and fiercely. I have held you so, so tightly in my hands. I knew you once before. I heard you once again. Here, darling heart, in the still, silent night, I will wait faithfully, ever and always, for you to come back to me. Come find me. Come wake me up. Dear heart, I will wait for you in the silence of this eternal night, as a candle burns inside of me, bravely, fiercely on. Love, Ruby.
What a beautiful prayer to end us on this day. The candles with the hearts, let's all join together now. And Ruby has brought in the presence, I feel very strongly, of angels into our midst, because that poem has come from an angel through her. She's the conduit. And so I leave you with our little prayer to our angel. O angel of God, my guardian dear, to whom God's love commits us here, ever this night, ever this day, be at our side, to light and guard, to rule and guide. Amen.
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 So let's inhale and exhale. And see you tomorrow. And Owen, you might have a little tune to play us out, please, because it's Thursday and it's St. Nicholas's Day.
Right. I'll see what I could do here now. Yeah. And if it's okay with you, Ruby and Mom, we'd love to share that in our notes for today. And if anyone wants to go back over the videos, please go to our Dámh Imeall link, and under you'll see a little drop down menu when you hover over the link for Dámh Imeall, and it says Dámh Imeall Vault, and the password is hEdge 2020, all lowercase, hEdge 2020. And we've been putting up the videos for the last 3 days with some references and our chats as well. So if it's okay with you, Ruby, we might share that, but you can just let me know. So this is a recording that we did, that Noreen composed, a homage to Saint Nicholas. And we will see you all tomorrow. Thank you.
Our last day.
Nevne cross squealing, nevne cross squealing, 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 oh nevne cross, nevne cross toward the wing shield. Nevni kwas tor do in Shirchan, Nevni kwas tor do in Shirchan, tor do in Shirchan, tor do in Shirchan. O Nevni kwas.
Bye, everybody.